the delay. Of course, we had votes. Welcome to meeting number 84, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. Pursuant to SO Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, October 17, 2022, the committee is meeting on the study of the ArriveCAN application. Just a friendly reminder not to put earpieces next to the microphone as it causes feedback and potential injury to our interpreters. Before we start with our opening statements, just very quickly, order papers, papers that we've asked to be tabled here. Just a quick update. Mr. Firth has been in contact with our committee regarding bank records related to GC strategies. According to his accountant, because of payments are older, it's going to require 1 or 2 extra days to produce the information. We originally planned to have them already, but it's going to be a couple more days, which I think is acceptable. Second order for production of documents, different versions of the resumes of the 2 Bottler witnesses have been received and are now just with translation. We're going to start with Mr. McDonald, I understand, for a 5-minute opening statement, then Mr. Utano. Please go ahead, Mr. McDonald.
Chair, honorable membres du comité parlementaire, I have submitted.
Dear members of this committee.
However, I'm going to add some words today because of some events of last night. There has been a concerted effort to portray Mr. Utano and myself as corrupt. The narrative is compelling, but it's based on untrue allegations. The falsehoods and innuendo have been plastered in the national press. Senior CBSA officials have distanced themselves from us. Nos carrières ont été suspendues.
Our careers were suspended. Our lives upset.
From Miss Simmons, someone I do not know. I hope you go to jail. Amongst other things, you are corrupt, greedy, a sorry excuse for a human being. I hope you are ashamed. I hope you seek redemption. These are all based on falsehoods. There was no cozy relationship, no conspiracy, and no fraud involving Mr. Utano or myself. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to finally present the truth, address the extraordinary allegations that have been raised by Bottler AI, and to show the facts that you have been misled. Je commencerai par vous présenter.
I'd like to begin by presenting the context of ArriveCAN.
National mobile application for Canadians to re-enter the country. CBSA's contracting authority, the finance branch, authorized the sole source, and PSPC negotiated the terms and authored the final contract. Our innovation team was given less than 5 days to pursue options. 6 companies were evaluated. GC Strategies and Deloitte were the only vendors willing and able to satisfy the requirements in the narrow time frame. I was not involved in the GC Strategies vetting. 2 options were presented to my superior, then Vice President and Chief Information Officer Min Doan. Min Doan specifically rejected the Deloitte as an option. Deloitte had in fact been my preference. As a result of the direction given to proceed by Mr. Doan, GC Strategies was recommended to the contracting authority. As the Director General of Innovation, the decision was never mine to make. Pendant 12 mois, j'ai dirigé.
During 12 months, I led the team developing and scaling ArriveCAN until May 2021. And during my involvement, all task authorizations provided to GCS were met on time and within budget.
I provided a costing for ArriveCAN, and it was $6.3 million. This was shared with my colleagues and my supervisor. En ce qui concerne Bottler AI,
with regard to Bottler AI, their allegations are unsubstantiated.
This committee, they began to collapse. They told this committee they believed their chatbot would make them $26 million a year. Their disappointment has turned into a campaign of baseless accusations against Mr. Utano and I. The facts are, in 2019, Dalian and Karadix competed fairly for a general services IT contract. On November the 19th, 2019, I received an unsolicited, jointly branded GCS and Bottler proposal for Bill C-65. The HR department was the client and the decision maker for the work with Bottler. A feasibility study was asked for by CBSA that had 6 parts. There was never a pilot in scope. My VP instructed me directly to help them deliver an executive appropriate presentation. I advised my VP that CBSA would use an existing contract. The proper contracting processes were followed. PSPC has validated this. I have had an unblemished reputation in the public service for 23 years. I have competed openly for every single promotion I have ever received, starting at an entry-level position as a student. My actions have always been guided by a commitment to the public interest. The allegations have been painted are incomplete, inaccurate, and have done a misleading narrative. The reality, along with the accountability of the leadership of the CBSA, is that the result of my reputation and the careers of good public servants are being shattered. Je vous remercie.
I thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me the opportunity to share the facts openly and honestly.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Utano, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of this committee, je vous remercie de m'avoir donné l'occasion.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to answer your questions regarding the Arrive Canada study, and most recently, allegations made by Bottler AI regarding work undertaken during my time at CBSA.
It has been conveyed to this committee that I committed wrongdoing. I have not. My reputation and career have been attacked and damage inflicted on both me personally and professionally. Today I will present the facts. I will speak clearly and honestly about all my actions. I welcome transparency and accountability. We have provided a brief to this committee with evidence that will substantiate all statements and facts outlined below. Regarding ArriveCan, at the onset of COVID pandemic, I was an executive director at CBSA responsible for the prototype design division that included the Mobile Centre of Excellence team. In early March 2020, the Public Health Agency of Canada, PHAC, asked CBSA for urgent assistance to develop technical capabilities needed for contact tracing at the border. No such capabilities existed at that time. The technical team was responsible for assessing technical solutions needed to fill this operational response on an extremely urgent timeline. Option analyses of this magnitude typically take months. We were given less than 5 days. The technical team assessed 6 in total. Internal development was determined as not feasible, given a shortage of skill set, capacity, and the urgent timeline. An outsourced option was deemed necessary. The 2 possible outsourced options were presented, the Deloitte and GC Strategy solutions. Both options were sent to the Vice President and Chief Information Officer, Min Doan, for consideration and decision. At a team meeting, we were informed that the Deloitte solution was discounted, leaving the only option of mobilizing the GC Strategy solution. The ArriveCan app and all its technical components evolved considerably throughout the pandemic from the original concept design. It was created through the collaboration of CBSA employees and over 19 technology vendors, one of which was GC Strategies. The entire agency's pandemic contact tracing response cost $55 million. This is not all technology development. The breakdown of the spending is published information, and I've included it again for reference. All GC Strategies task authorizations related to ArriveCan followed all procurement guidelines. Contracting was overseen and managed by PSPC. My responsibility remained to ensure the technology requirements were met and delivered on time, and they were. I will now address the separate issue of Bottler AI. To be clear, Bottler AI did not work on ArriveCan and in no way was part of the ArriveCan program. My involvement with the Bottler feasibility study was limited. On September 27, 2021, shortly after I assumed the role of Acting Director General, I received an email from Ms. Dutt with a CC to my team. The email raised 2 issues, a late payment to Bottler from the prime contractor, Dalian Keratics, and the second was discontent regarding a private partnership they established specifically around the collaboration between Bottler AI, Dalian Keratics, and GC Strategies. The CBSA responded to Ms. Dutt within 24 hours. This included resolution to the delayed payment and we reminded Ms. Dutt that the contract between CBSA and Dalian Keratics had contractual privacy clauses preventing us, CBSA, from discussing private or proprietary matters with subcontractors. Ms. Dutt's letter raised no concerns and no allegations about the CBSA or any of its employees, past or present. In fact, on a follow-up email the next day, Ms. Dutt praised the good relationship and positive experience she enjoyed to date working with the CBSA and its employees. Moreover, she expressed her appreciation for the prompt action, and the matter was considered closed. In December of 2021, CBSA's Human Resources Branch, the client for the work, requested the cancellation of the Butler AI task authorization, citing capacity and staffing issues. The TA was canceled, and I had no further contact with Butler AI. I will close on a personal note. I have worked in the technology field for over 24 years, where I've dealt with highly sensitive files, operations, Five Eyes partnerships, and both domestically and internationally. I understand the seriousness of ensuring that my actions remain bound to the professionalism demanded of a position in the federal public service. I have always upheld these values. Thank you for your time, and I'm willing to answer any questions you may have. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Utano. Ms. Kusi, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. On November 4th, 2019, two young entrepreneurs, Ratika Dutt and Amir Morv, were contacted by Christian Firth of GC Strategies regarding a Government of Canada project. On November 30th, Firth stated, "I had a great chat with Cameron from CBSA, and they will act as fast as they can to get you a commitment." Over the course of our interactions, Firth repeatedly stated that the CBSA was very interested, said Ms. Dutt. Firth repeatedly communicated that Cameron MacDonald would need to receive benefits as consideration for his role and influence in bringing Bottler, their company, to the Government of Canada. Firth stated that MacDonald had then CBSA President John Oswoski's ear, and that for Cameron, it's more than credit. "I just want to be sure that he's taken care of." The principals met with MacDonald several times. During a meeting called by MacDonald on January 22, 2020, at the Marriott Spin Cafe, MacDonald confirmed over drinks with the principals Firth's statements regarding implementation of Bottler as a CBSA pathfinder for the entire Government of Canada-wide implementation. During another in-person meeting called by MacDonald on February 6, 2020, which was also attended by Antonio Utano and others, MacDonald provided precise instructions and wording on how to pitch Bottler to the President to ensure success. During the period, MacDonald continued to provide intelligence to Firth on internal high-level executive meetings regarding Bottler that were above his pay grade. MacDonald provided direct instructions to be provided via Firth to Bottler and the principals in order to guide interactions with other CBSA employees. MacDonald also assigned work delegated to him by his superiors to Bottler for completion at the last minute. Firth regularly asserted MacDonald's influence and insisted that Bottler provide whatever was asked by the CBSA, as Cam has a very big stick and can get what he wants. They know where he's going in the organization and how fast. Over multiple years of interactions with both Firth and the CBSA mid-management, it has become evident that conscious efforts are made by both parties to isolate and control the flow and narrative of information to the CBSA executive leadership. In this instance, the leadership is defined as the agency's president, vice president, and C-level executives. As early as November 2019, while Firth was actively communicating messages from MacDonald to Bottler, as discussed earlier, Firth stated that the Vice President, Doan, doesn't know that we've been communicating back and forth with Cameron. Firth, on behalf of MacDonald, intervened on multiple occasions when Duff communicated important information with Oswoski that was targeted at the ministerial and deputy ministerial levels. Imagine that you are a young entrepreneur. You've been promised by your contact that the sky is the limit. Your concept, your technology can be implemented across the entire Government of Canada because he knows the man. The man works together with your contact to create magic. The man who has contacts, who knows what he wants. The man who owns a chalet. Or is it a cabin? Picture now that you enter into what you thought was a contract. You'll work hand in hand to create your idea across government. And what do you have to worry about? It's the Government of Canada. But suddenly, things start to go wrong. You complete some work. You complete some more work. But you don't get paid. So you inquire. You do a little digging, and you're concerned by what you find. So what do? You do the right thing. You file a complaint, because when you file a complaint, it will be taken seriously. It will go through the right channels and it will be addressed, because it's the government of Canada. Or will it? So, Mr. Tanu, what did you do when you received the first misconduct report?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, the email from Ms. Dutt on September 27th was not a report, but rather an email. And it raised two issues, as I indicated in my opening statement. One was a delayed payment matter, and the other one was a concern about Bottler's relationship with their partnership between GCS, Dalian Craddox, and Bottler AI. Nothing more. There were no allegations. I've actually provided the email in this package for reference. In fact, I was aware of the email when it first came in and knew that my team was addressing it. And within 24 hours, we successfully resolved the issues. So much so that Ms. Dutt sent a follow-up email, which I also included in this package, the next day, expressing her gratitude and giving the nature of the email and the prompt resolution. It wasn't necessary to forward it to my superiors or Ms. O'Gorman.
Then why, Mr. Utano, is Ms. Dutt saying otherwise now, that this was the first instance of her submitting that misconduct report in September of 2021, which apparently you turned a blind eye to?
So, first, I'd like to address the turning the blind eye. That's not true. The facts are right here
Did you
in the
escalate
briefings.
it when you received that report? Did you bring it to the attention to the senior office? Pardon me, to the vice president, based upon the procedure as outlined in the senior office of internal disclosure?
We are basically out of time unless you have a very quick yes or no. We'll have to get back to it.
There were no allegations in the email.
Thank you, Mr. Utano. Mr. Shawari, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McDonald, as a Director General of BTID, can you explain very briefly what is your role, or what was your role?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the role, do I have to click the button?
No, you're okay.
The role had recently been created. There was a reorg in the IT branch, and they decided to go through with the reorg during the pandemic. Essentially, I had the responsibility for cloud functions. I had the responsibility for the Mobile Center of Excellence. I had the responsibility for a prototype and innovation section, and I had enterprise architecture, amongst others.
Did that role entitle you meeting with vendors?
Yes, but definitely part of my role. CBSA is a mainframe shop. It's very old technology, and I was required to meet with vendors for new technologies.
Can you tell me when was the first time you met with GC Strategy?
The first time I ever met GC Strategies, the first time would be almost 2019, late 2018, possibly early 2019.
Circumstances around that meeting?
Mr. Firth would have requested a meeting to talk about my business priorities and see what work was going on. I also, Mr. Firth would send different packages of partnerships that he had been fostering throughout private sector.
Seems you had a relationship with GC Strategies.
I had no relationship,
Okay,
Mr.
so
Chair.
it seemed there was a communication, there open communication between your office and GC Strategies partner around the fact that they could come visit you and ask you what your priorities are, and they share what it is.
Mr. Chair, I met with IBM. I met with Microsoft.
Yeah,
I met
I'm not
with-
interested on those. I'm
Yes,
interested in GC
I
Strategies.
had open interactions with many vendors.
Okay, can you tell me when was when your similar interaction started with Dalian and Cortex?
Around August 2019, Craddox won a fair and competitive contract.
And that was the first time that you had an interaction with them.
I may have had interactions throughout my career with Dalian and Craddox, but there was no business that I'm aware
What
of.
was your role in the $21.1 million open contract that was given to Dalian and Cortex?
I was just the Director General. There was a procurement team and a technology team that would have done all of the requirements and assessment and worked with our procurement team at CBSA. Who would
Did
have
you
worked with
recommend
PSPC.
Dalian and Cortex to the HR or to CBSA?
No, I have no role
That's
in the
fine.
procurement.
What was your when did you become aware of Butler AI?
Christian Firth sent me an email about Bottler AI on November the 19th.
Okay.
It was a proposal that he submitted, jointly branded, with a proposal in it to do a pilot.
Thank you. Is it customary for you to receive, or any department to receive, unsolicited
all the
proposal?
time. Mr. Chair, we receive unsolicited proposals from the private sector all of the time. Mr. Firth and GC Strategies in particular, I would say 6 a year I would get them, but we get them from all types of
So
vendors.
can
And
you
during
tell
the
me how
pandemic,
would
we got
GC
more.
Strategies know that? Well, I assume they followed and they know about C65, but how would they know to put a proposal, unsolicited proposal, to you for the AI application?
I believe Mr. Firth was meeting with multiple departments. C65 was coming down across the entire government. I received an unsolicited proposal. My understanding is that they went to like 9 different departments and did the same thing. I couldn't tell you.
Okay, did you at any time guide GC Strategies or Butler AI partners in how to prepare for the presentation, or did you guide them at any time, a real-time basis, as they were presenting these?
Mr. Chair, I provided some evidence. I have a bilateral note from a meeting with my boss where I was told to meet with Bottler and I was told to prepare them for an executive-ready presentation.
What does prepare them means to you, sir?
It means they should have an understanding of the CBSA. They should have an understanding of the government context. They should understand what the business problem is that the CBSA is trying to solve. And at the time when they were presenting, they did multiple presentations. On December the 6th, I was not there for the VP presentation. Min Dong told this committee that he did not follow up and he did not write to Christian Firth, but he did, and I can submit that email in writing to the committee. But after that, he told me that they were very green, that they presented themselves well, but they were long and they didn't present their technology.
Okay.
He had a problem with that. And I have
enough.
emails that I've submitted to
Did
the
you at
committee
any
that show
time
this.
guide either GC Strategy or Butler to in any way embellish their resume to fit the profile that we've
No.
heard that repeatedly, that their resume was embellished, and GC Strategy has acknowledged that? Was it at any time that you directly or indirectly communicated to GC Strategy that we won Butler AI, and if their resume fits, the job is theirs?
No, in no time did that ever happen, sir.
Okay. What is a general IT supply and service agreement with Dalian and Cordex?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. At CBSA,
brief.
they had what was called omnibus contracts. So the reason why it was $21 million is it was supposed to last 4 or 5 years. Antonio and I started within about 6 months of each other. We were borrowing other people's contracts to get work done when we needed it. So we put in place our own contract. It was supposed to last 4 or 5 years. Dalian ended up winning that competition competitively. It was out on the street for vendors to bid on. And that's why that contract was around.
Thanks, Mr. McDonald. Mrs. Vignola, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. McDonald, in your opening remarks, you said you would have preferred Deloitte that was already doing business for the Government of Canada in terms of procurement. In the email written to Mr. Douane in the month of November 2023, you wrote that you found a Montreal-based company and you'd contacted GC Strategies to assess the options and go forward. My understanding is that subsequent to Mr. Firth's emails that you made a sales pitch to Butler, or did you find Butler? And Mr. Chair, I was not there in 2023. I was already at Health Canada. When I wrote the email to Min Dong, it was because I'd been asked for help for his attendance at this committee a year previously.
On October the 27th, 2023, a member of his inner circle called me and m'a appelé pour dire que Kelly Belanger
Called me to say that Kelly Belanger and Min Dong had been discussing that they'd say the country that had been my decision to choose GC Strategies. August 28th, 2023, I got a call from Mindong, and he said that Minister Mendocino wanted somebody's head on a plate and said he didn't know if it would be the CFO, Mr. Moore, or him, the CIO of the department. And then he said he would say it was me to the committee. And I said it was not my decision. I had not taken the decision, that I had put two options in front of him, and I would answer if he said such a thing to the committee. Mr. Dung fell ill and did not appear before the committee. The Monday morning, I said to my former supervisor, Nancy Hamzawi, that I had been threatened. Sorry, I don't know the word in French. She said I should tell this to my supervisor. Tuesday morning, I said to my supervisor, and at that time it was the Associate Deputy Minister, Heather Jeffries. Heather Jeffries called the CBSA to say that I had been threatened. And she met with me afterwards and told me I should not talk to CBSA nor to Mindong because of what was going on, that CBSA was aware of what was going on and that I should withdraw and stand alone. And that's what I did. So the fact that there was 2 weeks when Mr. Mindong told this committee that he had not played any role in the decision-making. You said he's wrong. He was the one who imposed GC strategies. You wanted Deloitte. That was a lie said to the committee. Everyone knows we have a team in back of us. It was his decision to take, not mine. I can also confirm with other people, because when he took the decision that Deloitte wouldn't be it, he said it was because the president said nobody can work with Deloitte because of a project called CARN, which wasn't going well. So the evening he made the decision, I called the Deloitte partner to explain they had not been chosen because of problems with CARM. That evening, he told me that my colleague, Sandy Kiriskakis, who is the main lead for data at CBSA, had said the same thing. She had wanted to go with Deloitte too. In your email of November 19, well, in Christian Firth's email, actually, which he sent to you 19 November 2019, he calls you by your first name. Is it because he already knew you? And if so, where had you had contacts before 2019? I had contacts with Mr. Firth in 2009. I had not been in contact with him from 2009 until around 2018, 2019. That's the first thing. The second thing, almost everyone calls me Cam or Cameron. That's normal. I'm someone rather informal with not just him, but everyone. Everyone calls me Cam. In your opening remarks, you said that you had not participated in the review of the decision on GC strategies. Who did participate? Mr. Lutano was the team leader, and he had a director for cloud, also a manager from the Mobile Expertise Center, and there must have been some 5 or 8 other technicians and developers who conducted the analysis of products or companies or solutions that might be implemented. And the final solution to go with GC strategies was Mr. Dong who took that decision? Yes, he took the decision to go with GC strategies. He gave me the permission to develop the solution. He knew that there were only 2 in the 5 days we had to make the decision. If he had not wanted to go with that decision, he could have asked for more time.
Mr. Johns, please.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for both of you for your testimony. No, I just want to be clear from the outset, this committee is not trying to destroy anybody's career, especially hardworking public servants. But we need to get to the bottom of this, and we want to make sure that situations like this don't occur again. Now, Mr. Frith acknowledged that he mistakenly sent the Codex he sent Codex the wrong versions of Ms. Dutt and Mr. Morav's CVs, in which he inflated their experience. Mr. McDonald, he said he went and did a back and forth. Was it a back and forth with you before he altered the resumes?
Never, Mr. Chair. As the DG, I don't deal with any of the
Okay.
CVs or security clearances. It's done by a procurement team.
Well, I appreciate that. Codex submitted these documents, this altered resume, which Mr. Frith admitted to Public Services and Procurement Canada, and subsequently he received a task authorization to deliver Bottler software. To this extent that you're aware, would Ms. Dutt and Mr. Moore have been eligible to perform work for this task authorization had Mr. Frith not inflated their experience? And I'm giving Mr. McDonald that you know the alterations now that you've been following the committee, what took place.
I'm not aware of the particulars of the contract. I've been following these meetings, obviously.
Well, they had 7 years work experience, and suddenly it was inflated to
Mr. Chair, I don't believe
years.
that they would have qualified under the
Sorry,
category.
let me just pause. And
Okay.
I've got your time paused, Mr. Johns. We have apparently bells ringing right now, unfortunately.
Oh.
I assume we have 25 minutes. Members, can we? Okay. I'm going to double check, but if it is, can we have agreement to continue for till 5 minutes before vote time? Thanks. Oh, it's quorum. Good Lord. Thank you very
So
much.
I'll go back to you, Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, I've got your time restarted, Mr. Johns. Don't worry.
Great. So, would they have been eligible to perform the work for the task authorization given, if they had revealed the true experience that they put on their resume and sent once to Mr. Frith?
I don't believe so under the categories that Mr. Firth presented them in. I don't validate that. That would have gone through PSPC. It would have gone through CBSA procurement and a procurement team. I didn't see the CVs. I've never seen the CVs.
Okay. What gaps does this reveal in the process? Just trying to fix things here moving forward.
Yeah, I guess when I think about this from a technology standpoint and a user of contracts, I would think that some of the gaps that may exist would be what Mr. Wood brought up, that if you don't have the people attest to their CVs when they're submitted, then it is possible that something could be done in between their submission from themselves to the government of Canada.
Do you believe CBSA, as the purchasing organization responsible for assessing, the contract securities programs finding, should have a role in that?
So the CBSA would have gotten this from PSPC. My understanding is that the CBSA does a secondary security check. They don't just take what PSPC gives them. So I don't think CBSA would have had any responsibilities in that regard.
Okay, given what you're hearing, and you've heard Mr. Frith's testimony last week, I assume that you heard that on Thursday?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that he's admitted to altering the resumes. You're quoted as saying, let Mr. Frith, let Kirsten do his magic in an email. Would you not send an email like that knowingly that he's altered resumes in a situation like this?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe I sent that in an email at all. I believe I read that for the first time in an article that was written that was written poorly. You might not be able to see this, Mr. Johns, but I took that article. I couldn't sleep, and I read out every single timeline that man quoted and represented it. And I just want to say to people, the CBSA did not. I'll stay here all day, Mr. Johns, so you don't need to worry about your time. We can give everybody 6 more minutes, okay?
No, it doesn't work like that.
We sat here. It was post-pandemic when we did any contracting at all.
Yeah.
When I was supposedly said that was February 2019, before the pandemic. I was talking about them being in a partnership, introduced to me as being in partnership and navigating through the complexities. I wasn't talking about anything nefarious. I wasn't talking about anything bad.
And I don't want to do that to you right now. I'm trying to fix this, and I'm really glad that you're getting a chance to tell your side of the story. Now, Ms. O'Gorman, she just wrote a letter to this committee. She's asked PSPC to temporarily suspend all CBSA contracts with GC Strategies, Cordex, Dalian. This is pretty serious. Would you agree that the CBSA would be sending a letter like this if it wasn't serious, if there wasn't concerns, real concerns that are being brought forward here. Now, I'm not talking about your involvement, but there has to be some substantial concerns. Do you not agree for Ms. O'Gorman to write this letter?
Mr. President, I guess the only question I would say is what has CBSA learned in the last 2 weeks that they didn't already know? The CBSA had the email from September 27th that had no allegations. There wasn't a report of wrongdoing whatsoever. They sat here at this committee and didn't defend Mr. Utano or myself.
Okay.
I would think the CBSA should speak for themselves.
Sorry, that is our time, Mr. Johns, perhaps in your next round. Mr. Brock, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So to both Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano, although you've not been sworn to tell the truth, when you attend committee, part of parliamentary privilege, there's a component that you are required to tell the truth. You are required to give us fulsome answers. So I just wanted to put that on the record because I know you have legal counsel present. Both of you have independent legal counsel, is that correct?
We have legal counsel.
Yes. Is it from the DOJ or is it private counsel?
We weren't provided with any support from the federal government when this happened whatsoever, so we had to go get our own support.
That was probably a very wise move on your part because not only is the Auditor General expanding her review, which started off as ArriveCan, but because of the story from the Globe and Mail in early October, her concerns about the same players and the same government agencies, she's expanded that review. But more importantly, the RCMP are investigating, not ArriveCan, they are investigating the CBSA, all the employees, all the executives, including both you, Mr. McDonald, and you, Mr. Utano, as well as other government agencies, the three companies at issue right now, GC Strategies, Dalian, and Coridex, and as to what truly transpired, as to whether or not there was some criminality, all right? So I can understand why you'd want to have counsel. So putting that aside, you, both in your opening statements, you were very quick to impugn the credibility of the whistleblowers. I call them the whistleblowers, the brave two entrepreneurs from Bottler AI, and you were prepared to actually throw under the bus the press, and particularly the Globe and Mail. So I just want you to be aware, sir, because you use the phrase a lot. Well, these are allegations, and I'm here to tell the truth. I'm going to give you the facts. What you need to be aware of, sir, is that the Globe and Mail that started this investigation analyzed thousands and thousands of pages of documents released pursuant to access to information requests that came from the CBSA. Globe also reviewed extensive documentation compiled by the entrepreneurs themselves, including contracting records and audio recordings of their conversations with IT consultants, and both you, Mr. McDonald, and you, Mr. Utano. So we have hours and hours of conversations that are actually recorded. So in my view, these aren't allegations. This is fact. This is evidence. I haven't asked you a question yet, sir, okay? This is my time, and this is how I'm going to frame the question ultimately to you. So I wanted you to be aware of that, sir, okay? So when we go back to taking a look at why Bottler would have the need to record you, it's very, very clear early on when you take a look at all the stories, is they thought it extremely unusual that it was the CBSA, you in particular, sir, who sought them out, and sought them out not directly by yourself or one of your employees, but rather a middle person, Christian Firth from GC Strategies, because their work previous to this particular engagement was directly with the Department of Justice. They had civil servants. They reached directly out to Bottler. They did the work. They got paid. There was no middleman, no ghost contractor, like we like to refer to GC Strategies. So that I want to bring to your attention, sir. Now, you also claim that it wasn't you who initiated the concept of of CBSA engaging with Bottler that it was actually Firth's idea. So, Firth testified last week. Firth is on record saying that it wasn't his idea, it was your idea, that you had researched it, and you wanted him to approach Bottler. So both sets of facts can't be true at the same time. You're saying something completely opposite. So who's lying to committee, Mr. Firth or yourself?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe Mr. Firth said that, and I think you can check his transcripts. I think Mr. Firth said that he reached out to Bottler after speaking to a number of CIOs around town. He had talked to me and that he had understood that Bill 65 was important. At the time, there were news clips that CBSA had undergone a whole bunch of sexual harassment claims, and that's why I told him it was one of my priorities. I want to bring your attention, since everybody's talking
Thank you. I don't want to hear
I'm
about
gonna interrupt
anything
both
else,
of you,
sir.
'cause that is your-
You
that is our
answered my
time, Mr.
question. Is
Brock.
my time up?
Your time is up, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Mr. Baines, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano, for joining us today. You said you preferred Deloitte. I wanted to just sort of find out Mr. Doan's role in all of this process. He talked about, we asked him the question, he said, I have a team that makes a decision. And then I asked how many people are part of this team. He said 1,400. So I'm like, or 1,400 people making this decision? And then he said, well, there's 6 directors. And then I think we've asked for some names on who those people are. So, like, you preferred Deloitte, and what was the process used sort of to select GC Strategies, and what was Mr. Doan's role in all of that?
So I can start. Maybe Mr. Utano can help me. They're doing
And or the team
no
that
worries.
he mentioned.
They're doing an assessment. There's 3 or 4 companies, some of them big, some of them we already worked with, the CBSA, some of them are outsourced, some of them are insourced. I see one floating to the top. I'm like, this isn't good. I also see about 100 requests coming in. It's the middle of the pandemic. That's why we were only given 5 days to do all of the options assessment. HR is coming, commercial's coming, travelers is coming. I wanted to bring in some Clydesdales, Deloitte, to be able to help out. I worked in evenings with Deloitte and the partner, and he put in an innovation team, and I told them the same requirements that the technical team had to work with. They came up with a concept, and Mr. Utano and his development team came up with a concept. On March 24th, he sent the options for GC Strategies, and I sent the option for Deloitte into Mr. Doan. Subsequent to that, I had a meeting with Mr. Doan where he told me that Deloitte was not an option because of CARM.
If I can add, Mr. Chair? Can I add to that? So the technical team, the Mobile Center of Excellence, looked at a lot of other options, but the theme around it was in-search capacity. They wanted to participate in the development. They saw that was a better approach and long-term, and so they worked in developing this concept, forwarded it to me, which then I forwarded directly actually to my CIO, Mendon, directly, and then left it there for decision and reference.
So when you said they, who's they?
The internal team?
Yeah.
So we had a technical team. We had a very small Mobile Center of Excellence team who was just getting off the ground and working in mobile. And so when this pandemic hit and Public Health Agency of Canada came to us in urgency requesting this this capability for mobile to deal with the contact tracing, we had to look for options. And so we went to our teams and asked them for options. This one surfaced as a viable option. It was based on a few things, more than a few, but security, the ability to provide a secured, protected cloud, the ability to have secured resources, the skill sets, etc. And so when they took that all into consideration, a viable option that came to the top, if you will, was this proposal. And so again, I just forwarded it on to the CIO.
And then the CIO makes then who finally
Well, at
makes
that point,
the decision?
the CIO would have had 2 proposals, 2 viable proposals. We didn't
Which
just look
were
at 2.
which were
Mr.
Deloitte.
Mr.
Your
Mr. Lake.
package, when
Yes.
everybody gets their packages, they'll see there's a Deloitte proposal that was sent by me. There's a GC Strategies proposal that was sent by Mr. Utano. I had a meeting with Mr. Doan afterwards. Mr. Doan told me that Deloitte was not an option. We talked about the fact that there would need to be a sole source contract. I have an email in my package on March 24th that I sent Mr. Doan letting him know that we would have to talk about methods of supply and suppliers because we didn't have any contracts in place at the time of the pandemic. And we would need resource categories that were outside of what we had within the Dalian contract. We had that discussion.
And what was
I
the response to that?
I was told, you need to do what you need to do. These are exceptional circumstances. I trust you to get it done. The whole thing was around whether or not we could have a release within a month or not.
In your time at CBSA on the many projects, did you use GC strategies to source talent like all the time? You said they brought forward 6 at a, almost
So we used
6 a year. Sorry, yes.
Mr. Chair, we used primarily our general IT services contract, which was with Dalian. Our understanding is that Dalian has subcontracted various resources through GC Strategies and other companies. I think my understanding is that's their modus operandi for the most part of how they work. So there were GC Strategies represented subcontracted resources working secret cleared within the CBSA when the pandemic hit. They were the ones working with the technical team that helped to develop the GC Strategies proposal.
And did you ever encourage
Sorry, Mr.
contractors
Baines,
to?
that's our
Okay,
time.
thank you.
Ms. Vignola for 2.5, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been listening and I'm trying to understand. How does procurement work? And how did it work, not just regarding Butler AI, but concerning Butler AI, and I think this is the best example I give, you have Dalian Coradix, who are essentially 2 fellows who find computer technicians, programmers, developers, network architects, and so forth, and they provide those resources to the Government of Canada. Then you have GC Strategies who do exactly the same thing. They go find experts in IT. Then you have one who uses the other to identify contacts, and every time there's a profile, there's, if someone gets a minimum, 1 to 15%, the other takes a minimum at 15%. And so we ended up paying money over money to get employees. Mr. Utano, I find this absolutely enormous. Mr. Utano, in your role and responsibilities, is there nobody in your team who could have been capable of developing an application? There's no specialization, and instead of paying out millions to 4 guys?
The answer is no. The level of complexity that was developed for the mobile application, and I just want to remind the committee that it has progressed to what you see today. It started with a basic digital form, and we were able to do that internally. It then progressed to pre-border, at-border, post-border, transactional, and holding on to very private information of travelers to Canada.
Thank you. So that capability didn't exist at the time. So did the government take action to fill that void? Because these applications are essentially the modern day tool and the tool of tomorrow. We have to stop paying out millions to one subcontractor after another.
It's our time, though. Perhaps you can say a bit for the next round with Ms. Vignola. Mr. Johns, please, for 2.5.
So, Mr. Utano, CBSA's policy on internal investigations into alleged or suspected employee misconduct requires you to provide any misconduct reports to your vice president, which was Ming Dong. Did you provide the September 27th, 2021 Bottler report to Mr. Dong, Internal Affairs, or any other supervisor?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to say it again. So the email from Ms. Dutt on September 27th that I received was not a report, but rather an email that raised 2 issues. One was a payment delay, and the second was a concern about Bottler's relationship with their partnership between GCS, Dalian Coradix, and Bottler AI. Nothing more. There were no allegations in that email. In fact, Mr. Johns, I provided the actual email in the package.
Okay.
And if you look to tab 23, you'll see the actual email. And then I was also, I want to just confirm for the committee that I was aware of the email when it came in. I knew that my team was addressing it. And within 24 hours, we successfully resolved the issues. So much so that Ms. Dutt sent a follow-up email the next day expressing her gratitude. Given the nature of the email and the prompt resolution, it wasn't necessary.
Here's the thing.
To address.
The next day, Ms. Daly then ordered a payment to Bottler, and Bottler got a payment. Can you explain why that happened so quickly?
Part of the resolution, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So part of the resolution was that we reached out to our prime contractor with whom we have the contract with, Dalian Keratics, and reminded them, quite frankly, that when we pay an invoice, we expect them to pay their employees. Mm-hmm. And so that was the resolution. The Dalian Keratics confirmed that they were going to make that payment. They were apologetic, and then the matter was closed.
You put forward in your statement, you didn't get a chance to finish it. You said, I've lost faith in the public service and those who, in a position of authority, had the opportunity to uphold these same values. Yet here at the committee, given the platform to do so, chose not to. Who are you identifying there? And is there anyone that's come forward to testify at this committee that you feel has not been upfront and told the truth?
Just a brief answer, please.
Yeah, real quick. The opportunity to access the email was there, Mr. Johns. I was disappointed that the email that September 27th was not accessed and presented at this committee when our leadership came here to speak to the committee.
Mr. Itano, Mr. Barrett, please, for 5.
Was GC Strategies named in any legal documentation for the work done with Bottler, Mr. McDonald?
I wouldn't be aware of any of the legal work done that you're referring to, Mr. Chair. I apologize.
In the official documentation for the project, was GC Strategies listed?
The only official documentation that I am aware of that I had privy to was a task authorization for a feasibility study. There was never mention of a pilot. There was never mention of GC Strategies whatsoever.
Was so GC Strategies was not named on the task authorization?
Neither is Bottler, Mr. Chair.
But they were subcontractors.
No, on the task authorization is Dalian Enterprises and Keratics. I am not privy to or aware or provided with any subcontracting arrangements. I am not involved in any of the discussions that take place between third-party partnerships.
So you would never know that, were it not for the public reporting on this, that payment to Bottler flowed through GC Strategies. GC Strategies then took a percentage for their.
I left the CBSA before any of the deliverables or payments would have been made. I wouldn't be aware of how the payment structure or their agreements are anyways.
On what date did you complete your time at CBSA?
I think it was May the 3rd. I got pulled over pretty quickly, and I didn't go back to my official records, but it was around May the 3rd that I started at Health Canada.
So after Bottler asked CBSA to stop payments because of misconduct, Diane Daly of CBSA demanded payments go through GC Strategies. Is that correct?
I'm not privy to those emails. I wasn't around at that time, Mr. Chair.
So you've said that you're not friends with Mr. Firth of GC Strategies. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you didn't have much to do with him?
I didn't. I've met Mr. Firth 3 times out of an office place in my entire life.
And you see, it appears that you placed a high amount of trust in him to deliver on a project that you deem to be of exceptionally high importance. That's the appearance of it. Why?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I can tell you about my experience and the only time I had worked with Mr. Firth before Bottler was ArriveCan, and I can tell you that the consultants that he brought to the table delivered. And I recognize that not everybody likes the policies of ArriveCan, but we delivered and delivered and delivered. And that year that I was on, we never missed a deliverable once.
In fairness, I would say you delivered a very expensive price tag to Canadians, and you delivered a lot of Canadians into quarantine who did not meet the necessity to have been ordered into quarantine. They were illegally detained. So those are also outcomes for that project as well. We've heard one witness who was caught lying to this committee that was on full display, and we've heard assertions that there have been others. So we see that there's, based on the allegations that we've heard from Bottler, that there's a network of people not following the rules, that they're breaking the law. That's why there's an RCMP investigation. And you've pushed yourself quite hard against this so that you're not associated with it. I'm very curious about the motives of everyone involved, about the people who would be lying. And so I'm going to ask you a couple questions. I'd like you to respond as quickly as possible, please. Was Mr. Firth honest and truthful in all of his presentation and responses to committee based on what you know?
No.
Was Mr. I'm going to circle back to that. Was Mr. Doan truthful and
No.
fulsome and honest? Was Mr. Osofsky truthful and honest in his presentation to this committee?
I couldn't say more than I don't know that he really represented or stuck up for the people that I would have expected him to.
Was Miss O'Gorman truthful and fulsome and honest?
I wouldn't think so.
Would you be able to detail for this committee in writing the areas where they were dishonest and not fulsome in their replies?
Yes.
Okay. And would you be able to undertake to provide that to the committee in, what's the standard time, Chair? Would you be able to provide it within a couple of days, 2 days?
I believe, Mr. Chair, you'll have a lot of it in my submission already, but I will undertake to do it within 72 hours if that's acceptable.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. McDonald. Mr. Kuzmierczak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McDonald, in the brief that we had received, it states Bottler AI wanted to circumvent the procurement and contracting structure and contract directly with the CBSA. Can you explain that?
Mr. Utana would be better to explain
Mr.
it because
Utana,
that
okay.
happened after I left.
Oh, sure.
Thank you for the question. So I've actually provided those emails, those subsequent emails after resolution. Ms. Dutt had comments in those emails asking if we could engage in a direct contract, to which we replied, we have to go for a whole new contracting process. Her dissolution or removal from the partnership is totally up to her, but we would have to go to CBSA's contracting and procurement department group to even begin those conversations.
They wouldn't qualify, right? Is that correct as a vendor?
So I'm not the procurement expert. I'll be completely honest. Since there's a separation of roles and responsibilities and duties, I would lean to my procurement colleagues in that. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I could help just the member understand. My understanding is that in Q3 of 2021, at some point, Bottler did qualify on an invitation to qualify for AI companies, but that's not a standing offer, and that doesn't mean you qualify to work with the federal government. It means you can qualify for the RFP process. So it would be an invitation to qualify for RFPs. It wouldn't necessarily make you certified with PSBC for a standing offer for the government just to go give you a contract and do work directly.
You couldn't just grant that contract directly from CBSA. There'd have to be a whole new process around it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I understand that whenever contracts are issued, there are layers of approvals, I imagine. Can you speak to a little bit in terms of what layers? It's not that President Osofsky just writes a check, or Mr. Utano or Mr. McDonald writes a check to Bottler AI. There are layers of approvals. Can you speak to some of those layers? Were they implemented in this case, knowing that it was a national emergency? Were those still applicable in this case?
It's important to understand this. As the technical authority on the contracts, which is something that the articles and Bottler got wrong, we are the technical authorities. We are not the contract authorities. So we are allowed to sign off that we have the funding and the scope. We are not allowed to sign off or push the button to execute any type of contract or negotiate contracts or do any type of invoicing. At the CBSA, within us, there was a controllership, which is under the CFO area. They are responsible for expediting contracts. If it's above a certain threshold, it goes over to PSPC, and PSPC expedites it. But that's the genesis, I think, of some of the problems that were exposed here, they kept calling us contract authorities, which we are not. We were never in a position to put these contracts in place and make contracting decisions.
You basically state whether the horses can finish the race. Is that correct? You sort of give an opinion on whether the horses in front of you can finish the race.
If we picked wrong horses, we would be told we couldn't use them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. What is the relationship? What type of relationship in this process did you have with PSPC? What role did PSPC play in your day-to-day conversations on this particular contract?
Perhaps I'll start off and then we'll move it to Antonio.
Sure.
When the pandemic hit, we needed help really badly. We started working with PSPC almost immediately. I wouldn't say that we cut the controllership finance area out, but we just went direct because we knew that we needed their help. Within a few months, we had started to work with them on developing a memorandum of understanding where we could help pay them to get some access to their resources to help us do contracting. Maybe from there, I'll pass it over to Mr. Utano to finish off because he would have worked with them for another 2 years during the process.
Thank you for the question. And if you could also answer whether ultimately PSPC approved those contracts.
So all contracts for ArriveCan were ultimately reviewed and approved by PSPC, going through our CBSA contracting team. When Mr. McDonald left, I continued those conversations on those weekly bilats. We were meeting with them weekly because the pandemic was continuously changing. The requirements were changing. We wanted to make sure they were always apprised of the situation and the operational demands. And so we always sought their advice and their guidance before moving on any sort of or advancing any sort of procurement or work. So as the contracting authority, we engage them all the time.
You delivered an app that basically was utilized 60 million times by Canadians, kept Canadians safe, kept things moving across the border, and you delivered it on time, on budget. Is that correct, Mr. Otano?
That's correct.
Okay, that is correct. The Conservatives wanted to use...
Sorry, Mr. Kuzmirchuk. We'll have plenty of time afterwards. Yeah. Before we get to start with Mr. Genuis, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Barrett was asking you if you could detail some of these issues. I know you mentioned they were in your package, but because we will not have them translated in time, would you be able to pull those items out and list them separately in a smaller amount so we can get them translated faster?
Mr. Chair, the clerk has been fantastic. If somebody could just write down what it is they want from me, I will undertake to get back to the committee as soon as I possibly can.
We will do so. Thanks very much. Mr. Genuis?
Thank you, Chair. GC Strategies clearly got a very good deal here, so it really matters in terms of getting to the bottom of this, who made the decision to hire GC Strategies. Now, I understood in your opening statement, both of you said that Min Doan was responsible for that decision. Was my understanding correct?
Yes, correct.
You're both nodding?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Doan very clearly and very explicitly testified before this committee when he appeared on October 24th that they were investigating who, trying to find out who, and to his knowledge, they weren't aware who. So, to be clear, based on your testimony, Mr. Doan was lying when he appeared before the committee.
I don't understand, Mr. Chair and honorable members, how they could be investigating for a year who made the decision on ArriveCan. It's quite clear, and if they had asked anybody on our team, they would have said the same thing.
Okay. Can you provide us with additional documentation to support your version of events? And are there documents that we should request from Mr. Doan that would verify your version of events?
No, the only thing that I haven't provided and I can provide the committee with is some names. I won't say them here, but I can provide some names that can substantiate what I've said here today. And in your packages, I can pull them out if you would like.
Okay.
Mr. Utano can also pull his out.
We're at a bit of a disadvantage because they haven't been able to be distributed yet, and I understand the circumstances around translation, but you would undertake to provide to the committee in writing, but not in public, the names of individuals who can verify your version of events?
Yes.
Okay. You sort of implied that Mr. Doan wanted to make you the fall guy for what happened here. Would that be a correct interpretation of your version of events? That he made a decision and that someone somewhere decided that you two were going to be the ones made made to wear this and therefore not supported by the department and made to appear responsible for the decision. Is that your version of events?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I felt incredibly threatened on that phone call with Min Doan on October the 28th. I talked to my old supervisor and then my boss on Monday and Tuesday morning following that. I think Mr. Utano can tell you that he had a very similar experience with Mr. Doan as well.
So you had also referred to a conversation that was relayed to you, and maybe it was the same one, in which it was reported that Minister Mendicino wanted someone's head on a plate. Could you just explain further why and for what and whose head he wanted?
That was my discussion, and that was the day that Min Doan threatened me. The discussion started off with Min Doan telling me that within the CBSA there was a lot of work going on to prepare for OGGO. This is almost a year ago, and I believe Mr. Mendicino was not happy. Mr. Mendicino wasn't there when ArriveCan kicked off and when all of this was going on, but there was a lot of news about ArriveCan. Min was worried that either he or Jonathan Moore were going to get fired, so he was talking about somebody's head on a platter. And he said because Jonathan Moore had made a whole bunch of mistakes from an accounting perspective, talking about how much ArriveCan costs, it could go his way or it could go Mr. Doan's way because Mr. Doan was the CIO at the time. And then he turned, we were on the phone, but he stopped the conversation and he just said, you know, Cam, if I have to, I'm going to tell the committee that it was you.
Right.
He offered me the opportunity to say that it was Mr. Utano or tell Mr. Doan that it was Utano and myself, to which I said, if you do that, I will have to respond, and we ended the conversation. That night is the night that I wrote him the notes. I stayed up until about 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out how I could find some way to meet in the middle. And that's why the notes were written exactly that way, so that Mr. Doan could come to this committee and present without having.
So you're referring to the email you sent, and I was going to ask you about that. So essentially, you were trying to be honest. What you're telling us is you were trying to be honest, but also avoid giving the direct answer that you've given the committee today.
I was trying to give him something that he could work with. He told me he had never been to committee before. Right. I believe his first appearance was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
He was very nervous about it, and I tried to give him some
No
help.
wonder. I mean, the implication of what you're saying is that he made the choice to hire GC Strategies and had some reason for doing so, and also that he came and told the committee that he didn't make the decision, didn't know who made the decision. And essentially, you're telling us that someone's head was going to be on a plate because somebody got rich, somebody benefited from this. Someone's head was going to be on a plate, and he wanted it to be yours and not his.
I believe Min Doan made the decision to go with GC Strategies out of the fact that he had been told that he could not use Deloitte. Deloitte was in the timeout penalty box, so to speak.
Who told him that they were in the penalty box?
Very briefly.
My understanding is that came from above.
Can you clarify what you mean by above?
So that is our time. Mr. Perlowski, please.
Mr. McDonald, you said you felt threatened by Mr. Doan. What was the threat?
Well, first of all, threat of employment. I had moved on to Health Canada. I had already been gone off the project for a year and a half. In my opening statements, I think I told the committee that when I left, I delivered a costing and it was $6.3 million. And now all of a sudden in the news and everything else, they're talking about $55 million. Mr. Doan was talking about people getting fired. I also didn't want my name to come out at this committee. I worked really, really hard during the pandemic. And just the thought of being blamed for something that people were painting as bad when we did everything that we could to respond during the pandemic. The whole thing was just a horrible interaction.
It seems like the horrible interaction continues with this committee. I'm not normally on this committee, and the committees I'm on aren't quite this kind of inquisitorial process. But one thing it seems to me, and kind of looking at the fairness of this, some people are given like 5 minutes to ask a question. You're given 1 minute to respond. It's your reputation that's at stake here. So I'm giving you the time to respond to some of the questions that perhaps you didn't have time to respond to. And I think specifically you were referring to the Globe and Mail article about the RCMP probe, that you had your big sheet of paper about the timelines and what was wrong. Do you want to just take a bit of time to expand on some of those things that you think they got wrong?
Sure. I guess, Mr. Chair, the reason why I did a timeline that was linear was because when I read the article There were just so many dates that kept on popping up, and sometimes they had the year and sometimes they didn't have the year. I feel that I've been misrepresented by Bottler as having them pressure to work with Christian Firth. They were introduced to me by Christian Firth. They went around town presenting together as partners. They presented to my VP without me being there as partners. My VP responded calling them the team. I guess I feel kind of attacked after the fact from a Bottler perspective, even with Mr. Utano. The email that they're saying that they made these allegations, you guys will get a copy of it. I don't understand why Bottler didn't provide a copy to the committee when they started off, because any normal common sense person that reads this email will know there are no allegations in it. They certainly didn't mention me on September 27th. And then all of a sudden on Twitter, they're dropping all these audio clips that are clearly edited. They're clearly put together in a way that provides anybody that listens to them with a focus that just doesn't exist. And so I guess from my vantage point, Mr. Chair and members of this committee, I don't think Bottler was treated unfairly. I'll make one final point because you gave me the time and I really appreciate it. I've been trying to make this a couple of times. When the Crown has a contract with anybody, there's a task authorization. I've provided it in my package, and I think it's really important for members to understand this. What Bottler did, the contract was for a feasibility study in 6 parts. So in other words, we're paying for somebody to refurbish the kitchen. They went out back and built a swimming pool and a jungle gym and a garage and wanted to charge the federal government hundreds of thousands of dollars for doing it. The Crown wouldn't pay for that. The Crown pays for what's in the contract. And if people went through the ATIP and watched all and read all the documents, they would see it says a discovery plan, a feasibility study, a fit gap analysis report, a pilot plan and metrics, and an executive summary. Nowhere in there does it say a pilot. And it's a chatbot. Why would the federal government ever pay $26 million a year for a chatbot? I'll stop there, Mr. Chair, but I take my reputation seriously. I have worked awfully hard to earn one. And I feel it's been sullied by some of the things that have been said at this committee, in the news, and by Bottler themselves.
If I have any time remaining, Mr. Utano, I give you the same opportunity to respond to anything you haven't had a chance to.
I'll be real quick. So I take allegations very seriously, and if they are presented to me, I will action them. And that even September 27th, there was no allegations. And I just want to read the reply from Ms. Dutt. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your prompt action and response. It is much appreciated. Please accept my sincerest apologies for all of this inconvenience to yourself and the CBSA. You have all been nothing short of amazing to work with, and I'm so sorry you had to come to this. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Ms. McNulty for 2.5, please.
Merci. Thank you very much. Mr. Utano, just in a few seconds, did the Government of Canada take the necessary measures to have amongst its officials people that were capable of developing the applications?
C'était très difficile à écouter la question. My priority was always, and now it continues to be, to develop our resources and our employees. Just before the beginning of the pandemic, that was what the intention was of starting small with a team called a Mobile Center of Excellence and bringing in the resources, not to do, but to teach and learn.
Okay. Est-ce que on a les ressources?
Do we now have the resources to develop? It takes years and years to develop the necessary capabilities to develop this type of software. The ArriveCan app was very complicated. Thank you. Mr. McDonald, Mr. Utano, having listened to you speak, it is my impression that there's a certain culture of silence, harassment, and bullying inside CBSA. Am I mistaken? Perhaps I could begin and Mr. Utano could follow. Yes, to a certain extent, yes. I do not think it is always as serious, but when it does happen, people do not necessarily have a door to knock on to actually talk to someone to get help. And in our case, it was clear there's some information that was there, but the people were not there for us. Does that happen frequently? Is it frequent?
So in my career, this is the first type of events that have damaged my character, my integrity, and my trust in some leadership. I don't know what the right response is, if it's frequent or not. I've never had this experience.
Oui, je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you so very much. I have many other questions, but it'll have to stop here.
Thank you, Ms. Vignola. Mr. Johns, please.
Mr. McDonald, do you have any idea why Deloitte was in the penalty box?
Mr. Chair, my understanding from the discussion was there's a big project called the commercial, I don't know, CARM, something about risk management, commercial assessment risk management project. I believe it's about $350 million or so, and it wasn't going well at the time. So I believe.
What does that mean?
I believe it was not on time and not on budget in terms of where the project milestones were supposed to be. And so the company had been put on timeout. No work was to be done, even though there was a global pandemic.
Mr. Doan threatened you. Exactly, can you clarify why he would threaten you, what the threat was?
So I got a phone call on, I think it was the 27th, from a member of his inner circle. I can provide her name and information to corroborate this. She told me that Kelly Boulanger had told her not to call me, and that Min had been particularly directing his attention towards saying that I was the one that had made the decision that it would be GC Strategies, even though the entire team that was helping to brief Min Doan all the way had not said that. So when I talked to Min Doan the next day, he had already asked me to help him with the committee. So this is why it was a bit jarring for me. He was pretty upset. At times he was almost crying. At times he was almost yelling. He basically said that somebody's head was going to be on a platter, and he started between him and Jonathan, and then he quickly switched it to say he was going to say that it was me that made the decision if he was asked.
But he made the decision. Is that correct? He made the decision?
Yes, he made the decision. I brought him 2 decisions. He took one away and told me to go, and I went.
But he
knew it
came
was
to our
GC
committee and said it
Strategies.
wasn't him that made the decision.
Mr. Johns and honorable members of this committee, I have members of my team that came here to support me. If the CBSA had have even just asked my team, they would have known who made the decision. It was clear. Everybody in government knows a DG wouldn't have made a decision like that. And Mr. Doan, I don't know. He was the one that got a non-advertised appointment. I competed successfully in an open competition for my EX4. Mr. Doan, when he was asked that question, he answered it a little bit differently, and you'll have to ask him how he was promoted.
Thank you both. Mr. Genuis, I understand you're starting off.
Thank you, Chair. I suspect there will be general agreement of this committee in light of the testimony we've heard today to ask Mr. Doan to come back as soon as possible for a full 2 hours by himself. Is there agreement on that point?
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think probably as soon as possible, Chair, but we give you that discretion as always. Mr. McDonald, I think it's very important that you said that Mr. Doan heard from above that Deloitte was in the penalty box, and that is why GC Strategies was selected. That phrase does include some euphemisms that I do want clarity on, though. What precisely do you mean by from above?
Doan was the vice president and CIO of the CBSA. There was only one person who was above him. My understanding is that all the VPs had been told that they could not work with Deloitte until the CARM project was back on track.
So above him within the public service would have been the president, but above that is the political level. So
I did not understand it to be a political decision, but if you're going to be calling Min Doan, I'm sure you can ask him what he meant.
Okay. Would anyone at the political level have been involved in these discussions, as far as you know?
Not as far as I know. I
You
met with,
weren't in rooms where they were.
I was in, for ArriveCan, I was in one meeting with the minister's office. They asked me if it was secure, and they asked me if it was scalable, to which I answered in the affirmative, and that was only one meeting.
At what stage in the process was that meeting with the minister?
Very early, like very beginning.
Was that before or after the GC Strategies was selected?
I don't know that GC Strategies was selected at the time. It would have probably been concurrently when we were kind of going. GC Strategies was not brought up.
Okay.
No contracting was brought up. They just wanted to make sure that it was secure because we were going to be collecting.
But if they were asking, is it secure, presumably they were asking that in the context of a particular application or company.
No, it was because we were taking away paper and we
Okay.
were going to be using digital means.
Okay. It was sort of, I wonder if you could follow up on that point regarding the timeline. So, what do you mean by penalty box? You mean they weren't to receive any contracts? That's
Yes,
what penalty box is.
That was my understanding. Again, Mr.
Okay.
Dunn can explain.
Yeah, it is sort of surprising to me that you would have this kind of informal process of companies being in the penalty box and therefore not getting any contracts, which means other companies get them automatically. Like, is this normal where sort of someone just decides this company or that company is not going to receive any contracts for a while, and we're gonna give them to whoever else bids?
I would say no, Mr. Chair. I wouldn't think it was normal at all, but I will preface that by saying this was like the second week of the pandemic, and
Right.
there was craziness everywhere. The reason that the sole source and the national security exemptions exist is for emergencies, and this was declared a national emergency. In terms of the decisions around why we could or could not use a particular company, such as Deloitte, that was not my decision to make.
Okay, in terms of the time I had left, I do want to probe the point you referred to just at the end about, you said Mr. Doan got a non-advertised appointment. There was sort of an implication in what you said, and I would like you to provide a little bit more on that. Are there certain relationships he has, access points? Do you think his appointment broke protocol in some way? What were you sort of getting at with that comment?
Well, Mr. Chair, the only thing I can say is that it was alluded to or inferred that I had benefited because of ArriveCan at this committee, and that I had gotten a promotion because of my work. And I wanted to make sure this committee was aware that I fully competed in a competitive process that was open and fair, and that I had resulted as being in a pool, and I was selected afterwards. Mr. Utano as well fully competed in a process. The others can speak for themselves as to how they are selected, but my base assumption is that when I left the CBSA, Mr. Doan was in EX4,
Right.
and he was promoted to an EX5, as well as others were promoted in the agency.
And just finally, to put a sharp point on the process of selecting GC Strategies. So Min Doan chose, and part of why he made that choice is because Mr. Osowski, who was the president at the time, had told him Deloitte's a no. Is that?
I will let Mindone answer for why he discounted Deloitte. I told you already what I heard from Mr. Doan. I brought my boss 2 options. I came out with one and the decision to go. I went. He was aware that I went forward with it, obviously, because we built ArriveCan and we delivered it. I left about 13 months after ArriveCan was kicked off. Mr. Utano continued it. Mr. Doan was the CIO for the entire time. When this committee started asking questions, Mr. Doan was still the CIO.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sousa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's a couple of things happening here today. One, there's Bottler, and then there's ArriveCan. Was Mr. Doan involved with the decision to have GC Strategies was Mr. Doan involved with the Bottler deal at all?
Mr. Doan directed me to work with GC Strategies and Bottler, who were working in partnership,
Right.
and get them ready for an executive presentation. Mr. Doan did not get involved in any of the contracting or subcontracting or any of that. He was aware, and he had a meeting with Christian Firth and Bottler when I was not present on December the 6th. It's part of your package. He also followed up with them by email himself when I wasn't on the email. And I have that email that I can share with this committee.
We appreciate it. GC Strategies and Bottler had no contract with CBSA or it was all done through Cortex and Dalian, right?
Yes, sir.
Is the RCMP is not reviewing the ArriveCAN application or process. They are reviewing the Bottler allegations being made, correct?
To my knowledge, I believe to Mr. Tano.
And have you been approached by the RCMP? I know, Mr. Tano, you worked with the RCMP for some time. Have either of you been approached by the RCMP in this review?
No.
So no one's approached you or asked you any questions relative to the appointment of Bottler and Bottler's allegations. Okay. You mentioned that the CTO does not approve the contract. The CFO is actually the one that cuts the check or approves it. But would they approve it without your input by way of the contract meets these requirements? They would have to rely on you to provide that information as well?
Yeah. Maybe Mr. Utano's best place to answer, but I'll just start off by saying we would fill in the paperwork for the justification that talks about the technical requirements, why a sole source justification is required, urgency in terms of time and whatnot. And there's usually a back and forth with that because they vet this stuff really thoroughly. They make sure that everything is done like
There's a threshold as well, right, by which needs approvals? Is that correct?
So the CFO organization at CBSA is called controllership. They have their own governance for all of contracting that's separate from the IT branch.
And how did that affect the decision with regards to the Bottler proposal?
Bottler would have been a task authorization on an existing contract. I've provided it for your thing. It would have come through as Dalian Karatics. They would have looked at it for form and fitness. They would have looked at it for compliance within the contract because the contract itself had a scope and it had categories, and PSPC would have done the same thing. So when the contractor then, the prime contractor who is Dalian, responds to the request, they respond to it with an estimate of the cost, the resources, the security certificates, and everything. And that goes through the contracting people.
Fair.
We do the vetting in terms of the contracting team outside of PSPC, that they meet the grids, that it's fit and it's compliant, and then I would sign the task authorization.
So GC Strategies, and there's been references in regards to their mode of operandi and how they act, and they're sort of a two-man show, but they assemble all of the experts to provide for a contract as they do for ArriveCAN. That's not what they did with Bottler. They actually partnered with Bottler to try to come forward with an opportunity to do a big deal thereafter. And I think that's part of the reason that they're upset, because that didn't come to fruition. They also made reference to a cabin or a cottage or a chalet. Is that you? I mean, a lot of allegations are made about your relationship with Firth. Can you explain?
So I just want to be unequivocal about this. I've never had a contractor or a vendor or anybody at my house or at my cottage. I have a little cabin in the woods. I go there sometimes, and especially during the pandemic, to just get away from things as I was working extremely hard. I've met Christian Firth 3 times out of a workplace in my entire life. 2 of those times were after the pandemic and after ArriveCAN started. 2 of the 3 times was with Mr. Utano and my mobile development team, and I was there for about 15 or 20 minutes. I have had lunch with Christian Firth 1 time. I paid my own bill after the pandemic before I left the CBSA. That is all the interactions I've had with Mr. Firth. I've only had a professional relationship with Mr. Firth. I do have fairly informal relationships with people. As I've told this committee, people call me Cam all the time. They know that they can reach me. I leave my calendar open, I answer my phone, and I try and be as open and available as I can to employees, staff, peers, and I was asked to work with private sector. So anything new, innovative, anything that sounded interesting, I would obviously be interested in. Mr. Firth had partnered with several different companies in the private sector. He told this committee that he worked with 22 other government departments. He had 40-some million dollars in sales, and he had been fairly successful at doing it. People talk in town. Mr. Utano can testify to the fact that we called a couple of different departments and kind of did a reference check to see if the work was good.
Thank you, Mr.
And he
McDonald.
was- Thank you.
Give me more time later. No worries. Thanks.
Mr. Brock?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for clarifying your secondary residence. There was quite an issue last Thursday as to whether or not cabin, camp, tent, chalet. So thank you for clarifying that. Another area I want clarified, sir, and I've listened very carefully, and if you said it once, you may have said it half a dozen times, as well as you, Mr. Utano, in terms of being very unequivocal in your responses that it was Mr. Doan who was responsible for retaining GC Strategies with respect to this bottler contract. And I just want to confirm that again. That is correct. That is your evidence, correct?
I will try and say it to you as clearly as I can, but I need a minute, and I will give you as much time as you want. I don't have a hard time
Can you
to
reduce it to 30 seconds?
Mr. Doan saw the proposal that I sent him after I received it and
Okay.
asked for a meeting. Mr. Doan had a meeting with Bottler and saw a demo. Mr. Doan told me to get them ready for an executive presentation.
Okay.
I have my notes there in there. The president, the VP of HR, the CFO, and others saw the Bottler presentation. They were interested in it, and there was general consensus that we should go ahead with some work. I worked with my peers at the DG level to develop a statement of work, which was for a feasibility study, not a pilot.
Okay.
I emailed my boss and told him I was using an existing contract, and I sought permission to go ahead, and I received endorsement to go ahead.
Okay. Again, you and Mr. Utano did not specifically seek out GC Strategies to be the ghost contractor, correct?
No, we received a proposal from Bottler and GC Strategies.
The answer is correct.
Correct.
How do you then reconcile, sir, and this is a question to you, Mr. McDonald, a year and a half after you leave the CBSA, you write an email to Mr. Doan as well as other members of CBSA, Ms. Sabarin, Mr. Utano, and Mr. Bird, October 29th, 2022. And I'm quoting various passages in this particular email attributable to you. You asked me for advice on the key question of why GC Strategies, but I also think we are all grappling with who selected GC Strategies. If you're so unequivocal today, November the 7th, 2023, why were you equivocal on the 29th of October, 2022?
As I explained, Mr. Chair, I wrote that email to Min Doan after I had been threatened. I wrote that email trying to give Min Doan words
Okay,
that
thank you.
he could use at this committee.
Thank you. I'm going to caution you as well, sir. If you don't want to answer this, I can understand your lawyers are present, but there is some really damning information in this email, which in my view, as a former prosecutor, encroaches upon criminal law in terms of interfering with witness testimonies. You're actually specifically coaching them on what to say with anticipated questions put to them. I'll give you some examples. I will start by saying that I'm not personally familiar with GC Strategies during the time in question. If pressed, come on, we want some accountability here. Who decided? How did this company get a contract for almost $9 million? Who made money off of this? Who was getting rich off of taxpayer dollars? Mr. Chair, I stand by my statement, and I don't believe there was a single person, and I'm not actually aware of any rules being broken or wrongdoing. This is not how we operate at CBSA. Why are you coaching witnesses who've been compelled to attend at a committee to tell the truth? What on earth compelled you to give these suggested answers to them, sir?
Mr. Chair, I was emailed by Min Doan a briefing package. I believe it was Wednesday of that week.
Did he ask for your advice on
Yes,
what to say?
he asked me for my help. He
Did
wouldn't
he
even
ask
call.
your advice on what to say at committee?
he asked me for feedback on his briefing.
I'll ask
He
again.
told-
Did he ask your advice on what to say at committee, sir? Yes or no?
Generally, yes. And the reason why I can say that is because his briefing package was just full of facts and data, and it had no verbiage. And he commented to me that he did not have the words to use, which is why I wrote what I wrote.
Did someone coach you on what to say today?
I practiced, yeah, I did.
No, did someone other than you coach you on what to say?
No.
How about you, Mr. Utano? No? Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chouari, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be sharing my time with my colleague, Mr. Kuzmerchek. 2.5 minutes. Okay. Mr. McDonald, can you explain the difference between a pilot and a assessment, as you call it, or a
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll try and go quickly. So the whole thing is a lot of times people call things pilots, but they just jump right in and they don't have any ability to measure its success or failure or its cost or its benefit. And so you kind of just like, you try something like, let's try this app. And then afterwards, like you're stuck with it because everybody likes it, but you don't know.
So there's a pilot and there's a feasibility.
Yeah, so-
from an output point of view, is the feasibility study output the same as a pilot output?
Not at all.
Can you tell me what's a pilot output in your opinion?
Yeah, so the reason why we would do a feasibility study is so that when you actually run the pilot, you can measure whether it was
So
successful
is it
or
fair
not.
to say if we're going to do a pilot, they would be configuring their system based on all the data to be able to prove that it works?
100%.
Whereas a feasibility study is whether there are going to be proper milestones, and that milestone, those 7 milestones, happens to be, or 6 milestone happens to be what?
100%.
Okay.
You would look at whether or not it would even work in the first place before you would go out and buy something.
Okay, so after 2 of those 6 milestones, I believe, were completed, there was a decision made to stop, and there's a contradiction between why it stopped. Whereas we're hearing from Butler that fully configured, ready to go on a pilot, and then we hear from CBSA saying no. Feasibility study, 2 of the milestone was done. The rest of them stopped because they were not compliant, or there was shortage of staff and funding for that. Which one is true?
I can answer that, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I can answer that real quick. So two of the milestones were completed and paid for. The client was CBSA's Human Resources branch. They issued a note to us, and it's in the package, requesting that we cancel the TA, citing reasons for capacity and lack of employees' resources that they can commit to the project, to which we executed on their request and canceled the TA. The other 4 milestones of a feasibility study were never done.
Thank you. I'll yield the rest of my time to Mr. Ryder.
Mr. Cameron, the ArriveCAN project, because this is the ArriveCAN study, came together in 5 days, I think, as was mentioned. Sort of, the players. In a normal situation, in a non-national emergency situation like COVID represented, how long would a process like this take, on
Months.
average?
Months, several months.
Several months, 2 months, 8 months, 12 months.
At the CBSA, even longer. I mean, Mindon did say he had 1,400 people. There were so many distributed teams, different technology stacks, and everything else. Easily 4 to 6 months.
Easy.
Easily.
You were asked to do a 6-month project in 5 days, pull it together. Can you put that into context for us?
It was very fast paced. It was very intense. Our teams worked incredibly hard. I had really incredible people that I worked with. They were professionals. They knew very, very quickly what there was and what there wasn't on the table with which to work with. Maybe Mr. Utano wants to finish.
I'll just add real quick. The business requirements were never defined when the pandemic hit. We never had the whole picture, and that was the challenge. We started with a basic digital form, fairly simple, fairly straightforward, but then the complexity came with a pre-border, at-border, post-border notifications, accounts, et cetera, et cetera. The complexity and the technology and the infrastructure. It never existed when the pandemic
In your
started.
20 plus years, have you seen a project this complicated come together this fast?
I've heard quoted that was one of the most complicated integrated projects in our time.
I appreciate the context. My conservative colleagues would have provided you $200,000 to complete this ArriveCAN project. What would have happened to travel along the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor if you had a $200,000 ArriveCAN app? What would happen to Canadian their information, their private information, had you been only given $200,000 to create the ArriveCAN app, as my colleagues across the table would have done? What would have happened to privacy, to trade, medicines coming through the border?
Yeah.
Could it be done?
Not what we built over those months and years. No, not for 200,000. Impossible.
What the Conservatives would have had built for Canadians to use in their time of crisis would have been junk.
Wouldn't have worked.
It wouldn't have worked.
It would not have worked. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzmirchuk. Ms. Vignola, for your final round, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. MacDonald, in your opening remarks, you said that the feasibility study had 6 parts, each with a value of $70,000. And the pilot project was not in that work. Of the $70,000, well, are you aware of what amount went to Butler, what went to GC Strategies and Dalian Karatics? No. As an official, we did not have that information. We never get involved in the discussions with the partners on financing. Would it be a significant improvement in doing an assessment of a contract and understanding where the money's spent? If in all of the subcontractors, I might be exaggerating, but it's the impression it's not profitable. You can't have a contract with many other subcontractors. Would it be a solution to just stop the craziness? I am an expert in IT, not contracting. I don't think it would work very well. We need to have space for the private sector to work together to solve problems without politics. But I have no expertise in contracting. With regard to ArriveCAN, GT Strategies had some $9 million, got experts. Other companies were approached. Do you recall which they were and what part of the work they contributed to? Yes, if you would agree, Mr. Utana would respond. There were more than 20 companies in all.
Over 19 technology vendors we partnered with our CBSA internal employees and 19 other vendors. Other examples were Amazon, Blue Ink, Tech Systems, BDO, and I'm just going off memory, madame.
Puis dans ces compagnies-là qui ont été
And of those companies that were approached, were there any that used strategies with subcontractors and subcontractors? Is that very usual as an approach? Yes, my understanding is that all of these companies we work with in government, in this space of IT, yes, many use subcontractors, especially when you need something unique or complex. Thank you. Do we continue to invest in ArriveCAN now, given that it's an optional app? We are no longer in the agency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Vignola. Mr. Johns, please go ahead.
Yeah, so Mr. McDonald, in the brief you provided to the committee this morning, you described Ms. Dutt trying to circumvent the procurement and contracting process and contract directly with CBSA despite not being an approved vendor. Are you aware that Bottler AI is an approved vendor?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I have been made aware that Bottler is an approved vendor. They became, as far as I understand, an approved vendor, but on a pre-qualified list. which is not a standing offer with the Government of Canada, and they only did so, to my understanding, in Q3 of 2021, well after I signed the TA.
Okay.
I think in Mr. First's testimony, he said that he helped them to qualify on this invitation to qualify list. So I'm not aware of Bottler's.
It's my understanding Bottler has been a qualified vendor under Band 2 of the AI source list since November 2020, which allows them to provide work for up to $4 million before taxes. The Treasury Board makes this information publicly available. Now, Bottler is able to contract directly with the federal government. So it's really concerning to me that you describe these many contracting layers with every pass through is what I'll call what you've cited, taking a cut, that you describe that as a regular contracting process. And you describe Ms. Dutt's efforts to get accountability from your contractors as, quote, circumventing normal processes. So do you really consider this case to be a standard example of procurement procedures being properly followed? And I'm asking specifically about the layers of subcontracting and the lack of any consent or discussion regarding timelines, deliverables, payment amounts.
Mr. Chair, I think what's important to understand is that I am not the contract authority. This task authorization with Dalian and Craddox went through CBSA's contracting authority and PSPC. PSPC validated it. It was actually reported that they validated it and they found that it was proper and within the contract. So that's important to know. The other thing that's important to know that the Band 2 that you're talking about is a pre-qualified invitation. It is not a standing offer. So anything that the government wants to do would have to go out as an RFP and Bottler would have to compete for it. It's not a standing offer for the government to just go give a contract to somebody. And the rest of you'd have to talk to PSPC. I'm not a contracting expert. I just kind of follow the paperwork that people tell me to do. I did it, and I think it's been validated.
But you're responsible to understand and follow procurement procedures. PSPC is they're not a babysitter. Mr. Utano, you have a subcontractor who no longer feels comfortable associating with your contractors, who's writing to you about a non-payment issue, contract-related issues, and asking you for a clean agreement. They're telling you they have no legal or signed agreements with any of the parties and that they gave no consent for any of the terms. Are you saying that this does not count as a report of misconduct? None of what it contains could be misconduct?
Thank you for the question. So, with respect to the private relationships and partnerships companies enter into amongst themselves, that is outside of our purview and our scope. In fact, if I look back at the article of October 6th, someone named Anita Chan from PSPC had the exact same response to Ms. Dutt. We just simply can't do things as we think or feel. We have to follow policies and procedures. Moreover, we've got privacy clauses that we sign with the primary contractor that we are not allowed to discuss proprietary information between CBSA and the primary contractor, Dalian Craddox.
Thank you, Mr. Utano. Ms. Kusi, please, for 5.
Thank you, Chair. Why do you believe that Bottler was known as the President's Project?
Are you asking me?
Either of you.
I really, so at the very beginnings of it, I had limited to no real exposure to the president on this project, to be honest, quite honest with you. So I don't have an answer for you.
Mr. McDonald?
This was, the president was seized at the time with the cases of sexual harassment at the CBSA and was trying to do everything that he could to find tools or services to reduce it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McDonald, you had indicated to the committee that you would be willing to give any documentation necessary for us to get to the bottom of this. I'm asking you both, please, if you would be willing to submit both your calendar as well as meeting invites from the period of January 2019 to June of 2023. If you would please submit those to the committee, please.
Mr. Chair, I have no problems with the CBSA submitting those. I can submit from May 3rd until now when I was at Health Canada, but I don't have access to my calendar from the CBSA.
Okay, thank you. We'll work with the CBSA to obtain those. I wanted to go back to something that my Liberal colleague said, and this was the $54 million price tag. Do you agree with that $54 million price tag? Do you think that this application was worth $54 million?
If you're directing the question to me, I left
Yes.
when ArriveCan was at $6.3 million.
Okay.
I believe out of the $54 million, there were things that are outside of IT. $8 million or $7 million went to Service Canada to do things. When I look at the cost over 3 years, I think if you were to look at major IT systems, which I would consider this a major IT system, I would think that it's less expensive than what people are making it out to be. I just want to underline, we know everything that happened now, so it's really easy to rebuild something that's been built. It's called like a model. We didn't have a model to follow when we built ArriveCan. They were coming up with things in real time. This started off as a replacement of a piece of paper that cost about $3 each. So when we think about 40 million transactions on ArriveCan, I like to think about it as an overall cost savings
But
to
do
the
you
government of Canada.
think the app could have been designed for less money than $54 million?
I think if you had have taken an approach of knowing all of the business requirements when you start, we probably could have saved some money, but we didn't know what the requirements were. We didn't know what waves of the variants were going to be, and we didn't know how to necessarily, well, I'll leave the politics aside. The business requirements came from FAC, and all we were trying to do was streamline the border and get information so that the streamlining of those people crossing the border could be quicker. That was
But
what
what
our
I'm
goal
hearing
was.
you say is that it could have been designed for less money than the $54 million that it was designed for. Did you want to add something briefly, Mr. Gaetano?
So I would agree with that comment in a normal circumstance and not a pandemic. I think so. And number two, and we were on that trajectory of developing our employees to become autonomous in this capability and these skill sets. But it just takes time. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit as we were trying to establish that. So,
Okay. Yeah, exactly. My $9 million to GC strategies, like that money certainly could have been saved there. My last question is, Bottler has said, or the principals of Bottler have indicated that senior government officials could potentially be receiving kickbacks, both direct kickbacks as well as indirect kickbacks for both ArriveCan and potentially other contracts as well. Do you have any direct knowledge about senior government officials, either bureaucratic or elected, receiving any form of kickback?
I have absolutely no knowledge of any senior bureaucrat receiving kickbacks. I can honestly tell you that I have never received one, and I competed for my job, as was opposite to the inference that was made at this committee.
and that's my testimony as well. I'm not aware of anybody who's receiving these sort of kickbacks.
Thank you. With my last time, Chair, I will just briefly ask, where are we at with the witnesses, the PSPC witnesses on Thursday, please?
Just very quickly, we have 3 for Thursday. We are getting a bit of the runaround
Okay.
for having them
Okay.
appear, unfortunately. They verbally have said, but they are refusing to put it in writing. I suspect that's probably
What did
where
you
we're
say,
going.
Mr. Jawari? Yes. Thank you.
I suspect.
What
I
a great
suspected
idea,
that.
Mr. Jawari.
Okay. Ask committee's permission to leave it with me with the names that I have. Yeah, they agree to be summoned. Perfect.
Do you require me to read anything into the record, Chair?
For Thursday. Yes, sorry, this is the ones for Thursday. We are
Correct.
summoning for
Okay.
Thursday officially.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
the names, sorry, I'll just
Yep,
read it off
sure,
because these
please.
are the ones that we have posted. It's Angela Durigan, Anita Chan, Savannah Mensur. That is your time. Mr. Souza, if you wish to finish up,
Yeah,
please,
thank you.
with us.
So Bottler's engagement was prior to the pandemic, correct?
No contracting was done until after the pandemic. The first initiation, if you will, the first series of meetings was prior to the pandemic, yes.
And you made mention that they were not Bottler specifically and not GC Strategy specifically, but certainly the contractor, right? That's who was put in place. And yet they delivered a pool instead of a kitchen, I think you were making a reference to. They were not really doing the deliverables that were anticipated, correct?
Butler keeps saying that they did all of this work and that they were owed all of this money. They configured their platform as, I think, a specific example. We never asked them to configure their platform. We
Fair
never
enough.
asked them to do any IT work whatsoever. We asked them to prepare an evaluation about whether or not their platform would even be suitable for the CBSA.
Yeah, in comments that they provided this committee, I asked specifically if they were compliant, if in fact there was any disagreement with their price in their contract, and they said no. They said they had complied with the issues, but now you're telling us that was not the case.
All I can tell you, sir, is I helped write the statement of work. I worked with colleagues in HR, in finance, to develop a statement of work which got translated into contracting things. There are 6 deliverables here. None of them are a pilot or configuration of technology.
Fair enough. I'm just trying to get clarity, just to make sure we have it
yeah.
understood. I get that. Listen, bottom line, this committee's concerned. We're concerned with the allegations that are being made. We're concerned by supposed nefarious activities. You've heard some of the line of questioning talking about people not speaking the truth, and basically they're in the take. They're on the take. So we're concerned that kind of activity is existing, and court public opinion is taking load because social media is picking up on it too. And obviously you've been targeted in some of these respects. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to clarify some of that once again, because this is one of my final opportunities to ask you questions on this issue. And we want trust in the system. A system that's been existing for how long? How long have you been involved in this?
23
Multiple different parties, different governments, correct? And do you see value in the work that companies like GC Strategy provides? I mean, you obviously use them.
So, Mr. Chair and members of this committee, I can understand and I can appreciate some of the questions that are being asked and why they're being targeted the way that they are. A general contractor, when you're doing a whole bunch of renovations on your house, is beneficial because they're a single throat to choke. In the case of the private sector and their partnerships, my understanding is that PSPC welcomes partnerships. I think there's a lot of discussion around this table around whether or not subcontracting is useful and whether it's good. As an IT guy, as a guy who's worked in IT for 19 of the 23 years I've been in government, that's not for me to decide and it's not for me to judge. I do think that governments of any color can decide to change policies if they would like to allow or change the methods of subcontracting, and that's a discussion that may need to take place. That's a study this committee may want to undertake. But in terms of nefarious activities and some of the things that have been suggested at this committee, I have never seen that in my entire life. I have never seen something called ghost contracting. I have never witnessed or would turn a blind eye. And I don't think I know Mr. Utano wouldn't either, to anybody stealing from the government.
I'm not sure how much time I have left, Mr. Utano. It's been alleged that in this committee, you have to speak the truth. You're obliged. We've heard from the whistleblowers, the individuals that came forward with these issues. Are they telling the truth?
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the allegations that were levied against me from our September 27th email, I provided the actual email and the responses. From that perspective, I believe they've misled. They've misled people in that direction. Anything outside that was not involved myself in particular, I'll leave it for the committee.
I believe they've misled this committee. They worked with GC Strategies. They went to 10 different departments. They've systematically told this committee that they thought they were going to make $26 million a year, that Mr. Utano had told them they were going to make $26 million, my apologies, a year. There were no such commitments made. There was no contracting put in place. The CBSA would never have contracted for the federal government. And even in terms of that, as I've clearly stated, the client for Bottler wasn't IT. The client was HR. If the client didn't want that work, they didn't do the work. So, I left a month and a half after the Bottler work started. I can't speak to the work and I can't speak to the complaints and I can't speak to the allegations that came a year later. All I can tell you is that the CBSA has never contacted me about ArriveCAN or Bottler. The RCMP's never contacted me about Bottler. And I've done my best to provide a fulsome recollection of events so this committee understands what my actions were, and I can only speak for my actions.
Thank
you, Mr. Chair.
very much. Mr. McDonald, Mr. Utano, thank you for your time today. I need about 2 minutes of time with everyone. You gentlemen are welcome to hang around and listen to OGGO intricacies, but otherwise you're dismissed. Colleagues, on the 21st and the 23rd, we had shipbuilding, but we've been adding witnesses at a fast pace for this study, and we will not have time. I've canvassed many of you that suggesting we push back the 21st and the 23rd for the shipbuilding line by line to later, if everyone's in agreement with that. I suspect we have the subs coming on the 9th, and therefore we have to fit the ministers as well as BBO in. So unless anyone has an issue with that specifically. The other one that's just come up is Thursday is the 3 witnesses that I mentioned off for PSPC. We've been approached by Mr. Mills, who's appeared often in OGGO with PSPC's as ADM, and I'm going to butcher this name, Levant Ozmutlu, DGS Strategic Policy Sector, have asked if they can join the 3 witnesses from PSPC on Thursday as well. I'll leave it up to you if you wish that. Mr. Jouari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify because I've just been informed that the PSPC the 3 witnesses, they did not refuse to come, and they are fine with coming. And they've asked for some senior people to be joined with them. There is a statement a correspondence has sent to the chair, and I suggest the chair shares with that. And I definitely support the fact that those 2 senior officials also joined the 3 witnesses, and I should have done my homework better to ensure who those 3 are, but if they're junior staff, and therefore I don't think, in my opinion, there does not need to be a summons sent because they are coming. And all we're trying to decide is whether can we have two other members joining them, and I don't see any issue with that.
Mr. Generous.
We are a bit over the time we had planned, and I'll just say the committee has already made the decision to summon them, and if they're going to come anyways, it's a moot point, right? Like whether the point is they're going to be in these chairs, and I think there's a reason the committee needs to hear from these people, and I don't think having, I mean, the people are welcome to be in the gallery, but I think we want to hear from the witnesses we want to hear from. Chair, I did want to ask just about about Jose Bastien.
I'm not familiar with who that is. Yeah, that is the retired person that we have not been able to get a hold of or track down.
Oh, okay. Would that person be relevant to have with this panel as well, or?
I did not use them as a witness, so.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we can come back to that then.
Mr. Kuzmarchuk, the Mr. Okay.
Can we get a resolution on whether the DG and the ADM could join as well at the same time?
Can get an agreement for that. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Genuis, but
what's wrong to hear from more witnesses
from them? But it'll be all 5 of them, is what we're suggesting.
Senior officials.
Just bring them along. You don't have to ask questions of them.
You don't have to ask them a question.
You guys don't have to, but we've got questions for them. 100%.
The people are,
go to a speaking order, please. Go ahead.
So people are just chatting informally. I do think it matters. I mean, I had asked to hear from Mr. Doan alone for a reason, because I thought if someone's ability to pass things off to someone else when you have a large group, I mean, if we can also have these other witnesses come subsequently, but just given who it seems were directly responsible for certain things, given also that we have a dynamic right now of
frankly, of senior public servants accusing other senior public servants of lying to the committee, right? So I think in that context, having people testify alone and separately without having everybody's bosses come with them might be judicious under the circumstances.
Mr. Kuzmierczak?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you look at the last couple of meetings we've had, and Mr. Johns wants to speak there. He's just, just want to make sure that we're not ignoring him. But I was going to say, look, we've had testimony from Butler, we had testimony from Mr. Firth, we had testimony from Mr. Cameron, Mr. Utano, and there's contradictory information that can't be either corroborated or can't be contested. And so here we're suggesting that we actually bring more witnesses to the table to include junior level as well as the senior level folks that have, have insight at a certain level, higher level, and that could answer questions. And I just think have them there together. They actually offered to come to committee. We want to get to the bottom of this. And I want to say that that's the reason I want to have the
Mr.
senior
Johns, I
folks here as
know
well.
you have your hand up, but I'm getting some kind of nods around the table. Can we just agree that the two, the ADM and the other one that I've mentioned can come?
Yeah.
And we'll just settle that?
Sure. Yeah.
Because we're closely running out of time as well. Mr. Johns, did you need to address?
I was just exactly going to go there that it's been standard practice in this committee that we've allowed staff to come. Just don't ask them the question if you want, I guess is the answer to that.
We did have, thanks, Mr. Johns, we did have a motion that we would summons them because we were not getting confirmation the regular way that they would attend. I will take your word for it that they will physically be here. Therefore,
I appreciate
we will not
that. Thank you.
Summons them. Thanks very much. If we're fine, we are adjourned. Thanks, colleagues.